The Russian language is one of the most difficult languages in the world. In this video, you'll find out how you can still learn it in just a few months. As I said earlier, Russian is a difficult language. While as a native German speaker you need an average of 600 hours for French, Spanish, Portuguese or Romanian and 750 hours for German, statistically you need an average of 1,100 hours of study time for the Russian language. But why is Russian so much harder than all the other languages I mentioned before, like French or Spanish? Is it because of the vocabulary? Not really. You have to learn vocabulary in every language. And whether you learn them in Russian or Spanish is ultimately pretty irrelevant, I would say. Is it because of the alphabet? Well, even though it looks incredibly complex, after a few hours, or at the latest after a few days, you'll have it down or at least understand the principle of the alphabet. That means the alphabet is also not the reason why Russian is so hard. The main reason why Russian is so hard is the grammar. There is nothing worse for a foreigner, no bigger nightmare than Russian grammar, guys. You really have to imagine that. In German we have 4 cases: accusative, dative, genitive, nominative. In Russian we have the same 4 cases that exist in German, but in addition there is the instrumental and prepositional. Now let's compare the English language with Russian. In the English language, for example, you have the word bigger. Big is big, bigger, biggest. As far as I know, those are probably the only 3 forms of big that exist in English. In Russian, on the other hand, we have an entire table of variations of this word. Bolshoi, bolshaya, bolshir, bolshir, bolshimu, bolshoi, bolshir. Maybe I repeated some of them twice, I just repeated some things twice now, but you get the idea. The word exists in so many different variations. And if you really want to be able to do what I just told you, this form, you either have to have studied Russian for a very, very long time, for several years, you have to have lived in Russia or other Russian-speaking countries, or you just have to be a native speaker, guys. Honestly, you likely won't master it perfectly, and it will take a lot of work. So, how can you learn Russian in just a few months after hearing how hard it is? Yes, guys, there are still ways, and I've prepared 3 tips for you on how you can learn the language anyway. Stay tuned until the end, especially tip number 3 will help you a lot. So here's the first tip: forget about grammar. In the first few months of learning, my advice to you is to completely forget about grammar for now. Because most of you, if you want to learn Russian, probably want to do so because you want to communicate or because you want to travel to these post-Soviet countries, like I do, for example. And in those places, speaking Russian is very practical. But to be able to communicate, you simply don't need grammar. You just need to know the vocabulary first. I assume that most people who want to learn Russian don't want to write and speak like Pushkin right away, but just want to be able to express themselves and have cool experiences and interesting conversations. And that's why, first step, forget grammar. The sentence "I see this grandma" in Russian is "Я вижу эту бабушку." If you have no idea about grammar now, you would say "Yeah, я вижу эта бабушка." You would use an A instead of a U. So instead of эту бабушку, это бабушка. But I'm telling you, everyone will still understand you. So whether you have an A or a U at the end, Russians don't really care much about that. And I can also say from experience, after living in Russia for several months, you will never have misunderstandings because of grammar. You will only have misunderstandings because you're missing words. So what can you actually do? Find a list of the most commonly used Russian words that exist. And there's a website that I'll show you now. These are the words listed by popularity, because the ones that are used the most are also the most important words, logically. And then, depending on your strength and energy, learn a few vocabulary words every day. Suppose you learn 10 vocabulary words daily. Then, after a month, you'll have 300 words, and after 3 months, 900 words. And with 900 words, you can already make small talk and get by wherever you are, but it's easier said than done, so remembering 900 words at first is also difficult. And to really know the language, you need more like 3,000 words, I would say. But it's a good start to know these most commonly used words first. So no matter what any teachers or professors try to tell you, at first, nobody abroad cares if you can form the feminine plural instrumental form. In the beginning, it's not so important that you can use these complex sentence structures. Especially in Russia, people know that it's a very difficult language. Or in other countries like Georgia, Kyrgyzstan, and so on, people know that the language is very difficult. And that's why it's not expected that you always speak grammatically correct. The funny thing is, in many of these post-Soviet states, Russian isn't even the first language, but the second language. And in my experience, many people in these countries also don't speak grammatically perfect Russian. And even in Russia, Russians who haven't had a very good education, it's often the case that not everything is grammatically correct either. So I've also heard from friends in Russia that even in Russia, not everyone speaks Russian correctly. But whether that's true, I don't know. But of course, guys, if you're at university and you're writing tests or being examined, you want to get good grades, so you can't avoid grammar. But if you're just doing it for yourself, for traveling and for communication exactly, then forget about grammar and start with vocabulary. Tip 2. After you've learned a basic set of Russian vocabulary, start watching Russian videos on YouTube, for example with subtitles, Russian subtitles, and write down the words you don't know yet. Start with beginner videos, so Russian for beginners. You'll likely know many words, and you can add unfamiliar ones to your vocabulary list. And that's how you learn new words. You practice listening comprehension, and then you can watch the video a second time, as many times as needed, until you understand it. Channels I can recommend to you: Russian Progress, Russian with Anastasia. Those are channels I watched back then, at least partly. Or you can just search for A1 Conversations. Tip 3. And now comes something that, well, isn't the most pleasant, but it really helps a lot, guys, and that's talking to people. And how can you talk to people if you maybe don't have any contact with Russian-speaking people, don't have any friends or anything like that? Go to the platform om.tv. You can set which server you want to talk to, meaning which country's people you want to talk to. So you can set, for example, the Russian flag, and then only people from Russia will be shown to you. I used to do that, for example. I once had a challenge that lasted about 20 or 30 days. I use this platform daily and chat with people for at least 20 minutes. And during that time, I made incredible progress. And I think I even still have a few clips from back then. I could barely say anything, but that's not a problem, guys. Even if you can't say much yet, try to speak. I'll show you a few clips of how I tried to manage back then and have my first conversations.
You're from Siberia?
Yes.
We're filming this scene. Shoot the day. In Novokuzhnyak-Nenetsk.
Могло быть лучше.
In Novokuzhnyak.
Injured by the coronavirus.
I injured him.
I did.
You've had 3 tips. What did they do for you? First of all, you know that vocabulary is very important and that especially lists with the most common words in the language are very helpful. At the same time, you're learning listening comprehension with this method I showed you by watching videos with subtitles. And third, you have a platform that you can use to speak. So you have vocabulary, listening comprehension, and speaking included, and you can start learning Russian intuitively this way. The paradox is if you already understand a bit, can speak, and know vocabulary, then grammar will come to you on its own. I would say that nowadays I have reasonably good grammar. I intuitively know when I need to use which form. And you learn the language, so to speak, like a child. Because as a child, you also don't learn grammar from the beginning. You listen, you try to speak. You somehow learn words and it comes automatically. You never actively learned grammar in your native language. And that's how it should be with other languages too. So try to learn the other aspects. And gradually, as you understand better, you also notice patterns. Then you notice rules in the language. And then the grammar actually comes naturally. These tips are very good if you are learning Russian on your own at home. If you have the opportunity to take a language course in Russian with a native speaking teacher, then definitely do that as well. That probably helps the most, especially to get started in the beginning. And yes, things like the alphabet, as I told you at the beginning, are of course not that difficult. But if you have help getting started, it's much easier to deal with everything. So guys, now you've gotten 3 tips on how to learn Russian more easily. In just a few months, you'll make amazing progress and could already have conversations if you do everything right. And yeah, I'm curious to see how you guys will like the video. Maybe there are only a few people on the channel who are interested in this, but even if there's just one person I could help with this, I think it was already worth it. Hey guys, I'll be home for a few more weeks, and I'll try to make videos for you from home, either new concepts or just by recording videos where I talk to you. But soon I'll be traveling again. The Soviet project will continue, so don't think that it's not coming anymore. It will come. But it always takes some time. Traveling is expensive and time-consuming, but it will come. Until then, I'll try to entertain you like this. I hope you enjoyed it. See you then.